Like for an example, if I were to go open my door downstairs right now, there could be you could let almost anything in, depending on what kind of door you open. A variety of different things could come in. If I just go leave that door open downstairs, a mouse could come in, a fox could come in, a cat could come in. It depends. A variety of different things could come in. Or if I open this window over here, a different group of things could come in. A bird could come in, a hornet could come in, a fly could, you know what I mean? A variety of different things, right? So hopefully that gives you a better painted picture with regards to what doors people open can allow different, families of things coming in. Like if I open that window, a fox is not likely to come through that. So you want to look at the doors that were opened and then the groups of things that could potentially come through those doors.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. You are holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. I want to see you.
Amen. So what I'm going to be talking about is different ways to recognize what demons people might have. So I'm just going to be going through a list tonight and talking about different things. And hopefully this will help you to be more effective and quicker at discerning what kind of demonic spirits people have, right? Okay, so I'm just going to go through a list. Like I said, the first one that I wanted to talk about tonight is what traumatic events or negative experiences have reoccurred or occurred in your life, specifically with regards to what people experienced early on in their life. you can typically tell what kind of root demonic spirits people will have if you can just simply talk about any traumatic events that they went over or that they had earlier on in their life. When people tell me that they have spirits of rejection, for an example, 90% of the time there was a failed relationship with their dad or with their mother, or they abandoned them or had a divorce at some point. That's really important to take into consideration. You can just easily tell like that, right? Or if people go through different traumatic things like abuse or even negligence and rejection as well too, because people having that lack of love when they are a child can really have a serious effect upon them in the spirit realm. It's very important that parents love their children, and when they have such a disobedience or a negligence in doing so, that can open a large door to the enemy, right? I even had a brother, testify on my YouTube channel recently that he ended up going into drugs and drinking and all kinds of different terrible sin because he had anxiety. And why did he have anxiety? Because he had separation from his mother when he was, a young child. So that separation anxiety, just being alone from his mother when he was born for like a week or something like that, led him down a path where he ended up becoming a drug addict and doing all kinds of different sin, because that anxiety got a hold on him and then started working on him in a very, intense way. Now, something I want to establish that's really important is it's not just traumatic events or rejection that allows demons to come in. Merely having rejection does not allow any demons to come in whatsoever. It's your response to traumatic events, and it's your response to rejection, because Jesus was rejected more than anybody. He was rejected by all sorts of different people, but he never opened the door to the enemy, right? Why is that the case? Because he had such a response to the rejection that he didn't open the door to the enemy. So that's really important. You can never blame giving heed to rejection or, things like that because of things that have happened to you. You can't have that victim mentality. But children, almost 100% of the time, get demons when they go through traumatic events or rejection and so forth, because one, they don't have the mental capabilities or the moral compass to respond to that trauma or that rejection in the right way, and also because they're under the headship of their parents, and their parents' sin can allow demons to come in, right? So as I was studying for this message, I found something very interesting. Every time, or at least I believe every time that I found, and where parents came to, or a parent, should I rather say, came to Jesus asking for deliverance for their child, it was always a single parent. It was either just a mother, or it was usually just a mother or just a dad. I don't think there's any instances, maybe one, but if I'm correct, there was 0 instances where a set of parents came together asking Jesus for deliverance for their child. It was always a single parent coming, right? And I don't think that to be a coincidence if there's that reoccurring pattern, right? So I believe that can lead us to conclude that, there's more than likely, either abandonment or divorce, or the parent having negligence and so forth, if we see that as a reoccurring pattern. When the people in the Bible, when their children had demons, right? We see a lack of relationship between both those parents, or both those parents didn't come together, right? Anyways, I just thought that was an interesting point as I was studying for this message, right? But that trauma and that rejection and so forth is only healable through deliverance, right? Demons are what make prolonged damage happen with trauma, where people continually have those emotions and those thoughts and those feelings regarding the trauma. If you can get the demons cast out, then you can, not continue to be weighed down by that trauma, right? Anyways, that opens the door, the traumatic events and the response to the traumatic events. Like I said, if the parents don't have a positive response to the traumatic events that happen to the children, a vast majority of the time, actually, the parents are the ones causing the traumatic events to the children, unfortunately, in our day and age, right? But anyways, that many times is the root. If you can just ask the person, did you go through any trauma? Did a parent die when you were young and so forth? 90% of the time, you can start to find the root cause of different demons that they're dealing with just by asking them about that. Okay, another thing you can look for as to what demons people might have is repetitive sins in the family line. If you notice a reoccurring pattern of certain sins being done by parents, grandparents, ancestors, etc., right? If a grandmother is involved in witchcraft, even just 2 generations down, the grandson can be a drug addict by the time they're in middle school, because that spirit of witchcraft has come down the bloodline. Exodus chapter 34:7 says, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that by no means will clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children unto the 3rd and 4th generation. So the Bible's teaching right here that God visits the iniquity of the parents, right? And how does he do so? By allowing certain demons to influence the children of those people, right? Now, another thing that I wanted to mention is certain people will say, oh, well, that's not applicable anymore because we're in the New Testament, we're in the New Covenant. But if we look in the book of Galatians, which the book of Galatians was written to Christians, there were some apostates in that group of people that were, at the church of Galatia. But still, nevertheless, the letter as a whole was written to Christians. And Galatians chapter 3, verse 1 says, O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you, that ye should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ hath been evidently set forth, crucified among you. And then down in verse 10, it says, in Galatians chapter 3, verse 10, it says, for as many are under the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, cursed is everyone that continueth not in all the things which are written in the book of the law to do them. So this spirit of witchcraft seduced them into putting themselves under a curse. That's really important to understand, that many times a spirit of witchcraft or a demonic spirit will be the ones that are carrying out the curse, or that are seducing people into a curse. So we see right here from Galatians chapter 3, Christians were possibly subject to a spirit of witchcraft coming onto them, and also a curse coming onto them as well too. Right here we can see from these 2 passages that Christians could be subject to witchcraft spirits afflicting them, and also curses. And you have to understand that it is the demons which carry out the function of a curse, right? That's really important to understand. The witchcraft spirit was the one that was carrying out the function of the curse that they were under in Galatia, right? Or some of them were under in the church of Galatia. So really what I try to focus on is just casting out the demons, right? I will pray to break curses, but in my ministry, you don't really hear me talking about curses all that too much, because if the demons can be cast out, then you don't really have to worry about the curse too much at that point, because if you're kicking out the demons that are enforcing that curse, you know that God has opened the lines or the door in order for those demons to be cast out. Why would he allow the demons to be cast out if the curse wasn't broken yet, right? So, yeah, I don't really try to focus on that too terribly much, because once the curse is broken, then you just have to focus on casting out the demons and overcoming the demons that were formerly carrying out the function of that curse, right? And that's what I found to be the most fruitful thing, is mainly focus on casting out the demons and driving out the demons that came down the bloodline from those generational curses. Another proof text that I wanted to give with regards to demons coming down the bloodline and them being the ones that enforce the curse is in Mark chapter 9, verse 21, when there was this individual who was asking for deliverance for his child. And Jesus asked the dad how long his child had been like that. And the dad replied and said that he had been like that since childhood. Or if you look at the Greek, it actually could be interpreted as since infancy. So that dad was saying, my child has been oppressed like this since infancy. Infancy could go all the way from 1 day old, right? A child that's 1 day old could be an infant. So we see right here the possibility of, a 1 day old having a demonic spirit. So if that's the case, that child hasn't even really gone through anything yet. So we obviously know that demons could, be afflicting or start to inhabit the soul of an individual, even from while the child's still in their mother's womb. That's really important to understand, right? And if that's the case, we know the demons can come down the bloodline, right? So once again, we see this case right here, Mark chapter 9. This child was oppressed by a demon since infancy, right? And that could be all the way from one day old, or 1 day out of the womb, depending on how you look at that. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is another way that you can discern what demons people might have is, what were the major sins that they did prior to conversion? if you're going to pray deliverance for people, a good thing to have in mind is what kind of sins they did prior to conversion. Were they involved in any occultism? Were they involved in any New Age? Were they? And another thing I want to mention, guys, is sometimes people just focus on that. They just focus on like, oh, were they in the New Age? Were they in the occult? And they don't look at like these other root things like trauma or rejection. Those things can be just as serious to look at as if somebody was involved in, the occult or the New Age. Many times I pray for people that have come out of the New Age, that have come out of occult practices, and the demons that they still have are not really even afflicting them with regards to the ones that came in through the New Age or through the occult. A lot of the times, obviously not every time, but I'm just making a point that a lot of the times I've seen the demons that people are being affected by is not necessarily always the spirits from the New Age or witchcraft or whatever, but from trauma or rejection or from abandonment, self-hatred, things like that, right? That's really important to take into consideration. Many people still have this idea that, things that are demonic are only things that are like overtly super obviously evil, like, sacrificing animals or like playing with a Ouija board or like doing New Age practices, right? We need to understand that those are not the only things that are demonic, those overtly, obviously evil things, right? That's really important to understand, okay? And you also want to look at the amount that somebody sinned or the nature of that sin as well too, like I was just previously mentioning. If somebody was doing occult practices and sexual sin for like 2 decades, they're going to have to go through a lot of deliverance, because every time that a person's been doing those sins prior to conversion, the demons have been piling in their soul deeper and deeper and deeper. And when you got 20 years of sin that you've been doing, there's going to be a lot of spirits that are inside of that individual. So that's another thing that you can look for as well too, right? You can just look at you can start to associate different families of demons with different sin. Like for me, for an example, I used to smoke weed, right? And I know that spirits of anxiety and fear and confusion and Leviathan spirits came in through smoking weed, right? So another thing you want to be familiar with is what kind of family of spirits are associated with, different sins that people do, right? And we're going to be talking about that actually as I continue to go down in this message. We're going to be talking about different groupings of demons that you can look for as well too. I just want people to take into consideration as well too, that just because you did a certain sin, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a specific kind of demon. Somebody could do one sin and a different kind of demonic spirit could come in, right? Like a python spirit could come in, like a spirit of divination could come into somebody, even though they're not doing divination. They could just be doing New Age practices in general, right? And allow that spirit of divination in. Or somebody could just be, watching sexual content on the internet, watching pornography, and they could allow a spirit of homosexuality to come in, even though they are not actively watching homosexual, tapes or sin or whatever. They're not engaged in that sin. They could still allow that spirit to come in. Like for an example, if I were to go open my door downstairs right now, there could be you could let almost anything in, depending on what kind of door you open. A variety of different things could come in. If I just go leave that door open downstairs, a mouse could come in, a fox could come in, a cat could come in. It depends. A variety of different things could come in. Or if I open this window over here, a different group of things could come in. A bird could come in, a hornet could come in, a fly could, a variety of different things, right? So hopefully that gives you a better painted picture with regards to what doors people open can allow different, families of things coming in. Like if I open that window, a fox is not likely to come through that. So you want to look at the doors that were opened and then the groups of things that could potentially come through those doors. I hope that analogy helps you guys to figure that all out. Another thing that I want to mention is, with this understanding, if a deliverance minister calls out something that you think that you might not have, Don't get upset with that. Don't get frustrated with that. You could have a demon that you're not even actively involved with, that demonic spirit. You're not even doing the sin of that demon, but you could still have that demonic spirit inside of your soul. That's really important to understand. So if a deliverance minister is, praying for you and they call out something that you think that you might not have, don't be offended by it, because you could very well have a spirit that you never even did a sin of that nature. You know what I mean? I just wanted to mention that as a side note as well too. Something else that I wanted to mention is, you want to look for what is actively hindering people today. Many times when people call me for deliverance, they'll start to tell me about sin that they did 5 years ago in the New Age, or sexual sin or whatever. And then I'll be like, okay, so, are you still being tempted with that at all today? And that's like completely irrelevant to what they need deliverance from today. You want to ask the individual, what is actively hindering you today? What evil thoughts are you having today? Not necessarily the major sin that you did in the past, although you can try to figure out what demons they have because of those major sins, if that all makes sense what I'm saying as well too. Like, for an example, I'll give my situation. I'm no longer smoking weed. I don't get tempted with smoking weed, hardly, maybe 0.01% of the time. But there are demons that came in through smoking weed that are still trying to afflict me, like confusion or anxiety, fear, things of that nature. So hopefully my specific example made that all click for you guys a little bit better, right? Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is if somebody has a reoccurring internal pull in a certain environment. If you enter into a certain environment, you get around a certain type of people, you get around a certain type of physical environment, and you notice certain evil thoughts go through your mind, or certain anxiety, certain demonic emotions or feelings coming into your body, that is how you can try to figure out as well too what demonic spirits you might be dealing with, right? So there was a lady that I prayed for a while back. Every time she went to go try to pray and have intimate time with the Lord and worship Him, she would be reminded of past trauma that she used to go through, right? And that helps, you pray against that demon specifically because you know what mission it's on. If you can tell how it's affecting somebody in a certain environment or situation, and you can also tell, in what way that spirit of trauma is trying to affect somebody, right? So like, if I was having that discussion with that lady once again, like if she said, oh, every time that I go to worship and pray to the Lord, I start feeling like, a hard time having intimacy or whatever, then I would go and ask that individual, okay, did you go through traumatic events that, would hinder intimacy in other fashions, right? Or I'll just give some other examples. Every time you encounter your parents, you get bitter, you start getting feelings of rebellion, you start getting bitter whenever you're around somebody. You could figure it out pretty simply in that way as well too. Or every time, a husband is around his wife, he starts to get timid, he starts to get afraid, not want to express himself, not want to speak up and voice his opinion. But every other time he's fine. You could think that you're fine, but when you're in a certain environment, then you realize you need deliverance in that area. You could spend 2 months not being affected by a certain demon, but then when you go and enter into a certain environment, then, you start to get afflicted, right? Some people teach today that you should just avoid those environments, that you just need to avoid those situations. That's trying to hide from the problem, though. You know what I mean? You want to be able to face those environments and overcome. If you're just avoiding the environments and the people that make you have those kinds of feelings or emotions, you're not doing it right. You're trying to escape. You're not trying to overcome the temptation. You're trying to escape the temptation. And eventually it'll come around to get you when you can't avoid that environment, because God will have it be so that eventually you'll enter into that environment in one way or another, no matter how hard you try to avoid it, right? That's really important to understand. Okay, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Just to sum it up, you can tell what kind of spirits people have based on attacks that they have in certain environments or situations, right? And if somebody has a reoccurring attack in a certain environment, that's not because everybody else around them is all messed up. Maybe they are, but you don't want to just blame everybody else. many people that get rejected or many people that get offended, they will just look at the sin. Oh, everybody's rejecting me. Everybody, offends me and everything like that. Well, if that's happening with like everybody that you encounter, you need to do some internal searching, because you are probably the one that has the problem, because the demons know that you have a weakness in that area and they are inspiring people to do those certain sins against you because they know, you're weak in that area. When you overcome a certain sin, you gain spiritual maturity in that certain area, you will attract less of those kinds of environments, right? Like when I first overcame sexual sin, there would be women just like, trying to, do demonic things and demonically inspired to try to tempt me. That doesn't happen. Not in a long time. It hasn't happened in a long time where a demonically inspired woman has come up and tried to, seduce me in some kind of way. Right? So you will attract less of those kinds of environments and situations when you get deliverance and overcome the demonic spirits that you are dealing with. I wanted to read Luke chapter 22, verse 31 through 32. It's talking about, when Jesus was talking to Peter, when Jesus was telling Peter that Peter was going to end up denying him. It says in verse 31 of Luke chapter 22, "And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. And when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren." So Peter, before he was in that environment where he was tempted to deny Jesus, notice he had so much boldness and confidence. Lord, I'll never deny you. I'll go to jail. I'll die. All these different things. But then when he entered into a certain environment, the devil was able to start attacking him, was able to start attacking Peter, right? So that's just one example that I wanted to give, right? Peter didn't think that he had that problem until he entered into that certain environment or situation, right? And we can also tell from this that when Peter was tempted to deny Jesus, when he was having that fear, that was coming from the devil, because Jesus said, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. So we know it was the devil who was giving Peter the fear of man and the temptation to, shrivel up and, not boldly confess the Lord, right? So I just wanted to mention that as a side note. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to talk is if somebody has reoccurring thought patterns. If you have reoccurring thought patterns that are not of God, you can just tell what kind of demonic spirits you have just simply based on that. The problem is a lot of Christians just count their thoughts as their own. They don't discern, is this thought coming from God or is this thought coming from the devil? Many times people are still too ingrained with their sin. You know what I mean? They're still ingrained with those demonic spirits. So therefore, they just subconsciously accept those thoughts. If somebody just subconsciously accepts certain thoughts in a certain area, you know that they have a stronghold in that area. When you're able to start recognizing thoughts as demonic more quickly and more often, like in a certain area, you are becoming more at odds with those demons, right? Because those thoughts are becoming foreign to you, like, you're not in agreement with them, right? But if you just subconsciously accept them all the time, then you have a stronghold in that area. Anyways, if you have reoccurring thoughts in a certain area, you know that, and they're coming internally, right? Those thoughts are coming internally. You can know what area you're bound in. And I think this is a good indicator to show that when we are dealing with demons as a Christian, many times they're coming from the inside, because you have internal emotions, you have internal thoughts, you have internal pulls to do evil that are obviously not coming from God, that are coming from the enemy. People act like nowadays, the demons that are afflicting Christians are just on the outside. Then why is it when we're being oppressed by the enemy, everything's happening, a vast majority of things are happening internally. You're having internal evil thoughts, you're having internal evil emotions, you're having internal evil propensities to do certain things, right? Why would all of these things be coming from the inside of man if the demons were all on the outside, right? So I think that's a good thing to look at with regards to, are the demons on the inside or the outside, right? I do understand demons can afflict people from the outside, but that's very rare in comparison to how many demons are afflicting people from the inside. When Jesus and the apostles did deliverance, They didn't go around casting demons off of people. Like the demons were just like hanging around on their shoulder or their neck. Or I'm not ruling that off as an impossibility, but the focus in which we see in the Bible was casting demons out of people. If demons got cast out of people, we know that the problem that we should be focusing on is the demons inside of the people, right? So that's one thing that I wanted to mention as a side note as well, too. Okay, I'm just going to talk about one more, and then I'm going to be talking about the groupings of different demons. But the next thing that I wanted to talk about is what things you know are the will of God, or somebody knows they're the will of God, but they have a very strong internal desire to not do it. Like, let's say God convicts you to do something, and then you just feel like an internal dread, like, oh, I don't want to do this. Many times you can tell what kind of demonic spirits you have in a situation like that, right? Like you might have a complaining spirit, or you might have a spirit of negativity, or you might have a spirit of rebellion manifesting in situations like that, right? So if you go to do God's will and you notice a strong internal, once again, like I talked about, internal resistance to do that good, not every time, but I would say a vast majority of the time, you have a stronghold in that area, right? Because the Bible says in the book of John that the commandments of God should not be grievous to us, right? So if they're grievous to you, you know something's wrong. I wanted to talk again about the situation with Peter, but I'm going to turn over to Matthew chapter 16, verse 22. Verse 22, it says, "Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. But he turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan, thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross, and follow me." Interesting how Jesus talks about denying yourself right after he talked about how Peter was having a demonic problem. Is it just a coincidence that Jesus said you need to deny yourself after he talked about how Peter was having this influence from the enemy? Jesus is saying to all men, he's talking to all men that they need to deny themselves. So can we make a connection right here as to the reason of why men need to deny themselves? Did Jesus just use Peter as an example, that Peter had demonic influence trying to inspire him to do evil? And then Jesus is saying, Peter, you need to deny yourself. And then he turns to his disciples and says, you guys need to deny yourselves as well too. In a similar fashion that Peter needed to deny himself. So if it was a similar solution, I think we can conclude that there's a similar problem that human beings need to deny themselves of, right? So I hope you guys will get the point I'm trying to make right here. I don't find it a coincidence that Jesus just got done rebuking Peter for having a demonic problem, and then Jesus turns to everybody else and says, you guys need to deny yourselves as well too. Why? Because I believe, all human beings have a similar problem from time to time that Peter had, where Peter was demonically inspired to not do the will of God, right? You need to deny yourself because you will have something internally from the enemy in you that is trying to resistant to doing the will of God, right? And that's what we see with Peter right here. He was resistant to the will of God, to the will of Jesus, because he had demonic influence trying to stop him from doing what was right. So I hope you guys are able to make that connection right there, what I'm saying about those two ideas being right by each other. Many times you can look at that resistance as actually an area in which you need deliverance, right? Like, for an example, many people will tell me, oh, I'm so afraid. Some lady just told me even today that I was praying for. She was like, I didn't call you for a month because I was just like so afraid to talk to you. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if you had that amount of fear, if you had that amount of resistance, it's probably, a good indicator that you're about to receive deliverance. I think I've talked about this on my YouTube channel before, but if somebody is having, a resistance, a pull to not want to get deliverance, many times that's actually better than the person that's just sitting there stone cold and not being afflicted in any type of way whatsoever. Many times when I see the devil messing with somebody, trying to stop them from getting to their deliverance appointment, many times that tells me I need to get to that deliverance appointment. I need to have that deliverance appointment work out, because there's something in the spiritual realm that's trying to prohibit them. So the main gist of what I'm talking about, guys, is when you find a resistance to do something that is the will of God, question that in your mind. Why am I having such a resistance? Why am I having such a internal disdain for doing something that's good, doing something that is the will of God, that's pleasing to God? And many times you can figure out what strongholds you have based on a question like that, right? Many times, like, if I'm tempted to be complain about something or be negative about something, it clicks in my mind. Okay, I'm having a resistance from the enemy right now. I should rather be positive. I should rather be grateful, right? And if you can apply that in your walk, man, that will help you to grow so much, because then you will look at that resistance as encouragement, as a good indicator that you should actually go and do the will of God, that, you're on the right path, right? So you don't want to just take that as your only indicator that you're on the right path or you're doing the right thing, but still, nevertheless, it's a really good thing to look for.